Who am I? The dialogue, breaking the ego thought 1. Beginning of the conversation, King Milinda, after paying homage to the 80,000 monks and the venerable Nagasena, sat down in a suitable place, greeted them, and began the conversation. King Milinda, a famous king who had long been known for his talent in shaking many religions, expressed his desire to have a conversation with Nagasena. The monk Nagasena observed the king and realized that the king's appearance was indeed extraordinary, as the rumors had not been true. However, with his courage, intelligence, and wisdom, Nagasena did not find it difficult to converse with the king. When King Milinda asked the question, the monk Natien smiled and calmly replied, "Your Majesty, just ask, I will listen." King Milinda, meanwhile, also began to test Natien's calmness and intelligence by replying, "Venerable sir, I have asked. Please listen." Natien did not let the king wait long. He immediately replied, "Venerable sir, I have heard. Please continue." King Milinda, with a little test of intelligence, emphasized again, "Venerable sir, I have asked." Natien also did not miss a beat. "Venerable sir, I have also answered." The king immediately asked, "How did you answer?" Natien calmly replied, "How did the king ask?" With just a few simple questions and answers, the entire audience of 80,000 monks, 500 of the king's retinue, and a large number of male and female attendants outside the lecture hall all felt excited. The shouts of "good" resounded like thunder, creating an atmosphere filled with joy and admiration. 2. Debate on names. When the atmosphere had calmed down, King Milinda continued to ask, "Venerable sir, what is your name?" Natien replied with a gentle smile and explained, "Your Majesty, my name is Natien. My master, brothers, and Dharma friends also called me by that name. As for my parents, they sometimes called me Viranasena, Surasena, or Sihasena. However, no matter what name is used, they are all just names, just empty names, and have nothing to do with me. Those names are only to distinguish one person from another. There is nothing like I or mine, as the world often mistakenly perceives, egotism and wrong views. Your Majesty, do you understand?" King Milinda was surprised when he heard this. He raised his hand and explained to everyone around him, "Please, all of you, be my witnesses. The Venerable Natien just said that the name Natien was given by his parents. His fellow practitioners also called him that. But in fact, there is nothing Natien there. There is nothing like I and mine. Did everyone hear clearly?" Then the king turned to Natien with a questioning tone and a bit of doubt. "Venerable sir, if there is no such thing as me and mine, then who is the recipient of those 4 things who give alms, offering robes, food, shelter, medicine, and other things? Who keeps the precepts? Who meditates? Who attains enlightenment and nirvana? If so, then no one has committed crimes such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, drinking alcohol, and the 5 heinous crimes of Avicii hell. Thus, good karma and bad karma do not exist. No one creates crimes, and there is no retribution. If someone kills the venerable, they do not commit the crime of murder. And the teacher who guides, the teacher who teaches, the monk who ordains the venerable, also does not exist. Whatever the fellow practitioners call the venerable Natien Bai is also not there. So who is that so-called Natien? I hope the venerable one will explain it to me. Did you hear it clearly?" Natien calmly replied, "Your Majesty, I heard it clearly." The king continued to ask, "Is the person listening there Natien?" Natien replied, "No, sir." The king asked further, "Is there nothing called Natien?" Natien replied, "Yes, that's right." The king continued to question, "Are those hair, fur, nails, teeth, and skin, Natien?" Natien calmly denied, "Your Majesty, no." The king continued to ask, "Are those flesh, marrow, tendons, and bones, Natien?" Natien replied again, "No, sir." The king did not stop. He continued, "Are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness the Na-Tien?" The Na-Tien replied, "Your Majesty, no." The king continued, "Or are the six sense organs, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, the Na-Tien?" The Na-Tien answered firmly, "Yes, that is not so." Finally, the king asked, "So the five aggregates combined are the Na-Tien?" The Na-Tien thought and replied, "Yes, that is not certain." 3. King Melinda was surprised. At this point, King Melinda felt confused. He raised his voice loudly. "Venerable Sir, just now I have thoroughly asked about the 32 impurities, the 6 sense bases, the 5 aggregates, etc., whether they are Na-Tien or not, all of which were denied by the Venerable Sir. And indeed, I also acknowledge it. When I contemplate thoroughly each part mentioned in the question, there is nothing called Na-Tien. Then why, when I asked before, the Venerable Sir said that the Venerable Sir was Na-Tien? It turns out that the Venerable Sir lied. Here, my 500 trusted attendants and 80,000 monks, please be my witnesses." Na-Tien remained calm, not wavering in the face of King Melinda's accusations. Venerable Na-Tien, with his clear wisdom and great compassion, understood the arrogance and agitation in the king's mind. He understood that his goal was to subdue the king, to convert the king, and to lead the king onto the path of righteousness. Therefore, he did not get angry, but sat silently and opened his heart to compassion. After a moment of silence to let the arrogance and agitation in the king's mind subside, Venerable Na-Tien slowly said, "Your Majesty, you are a blessed king and live in high happiness. But because of your mind seeking the way, you did not mind the long journey, coming here in the middle of the hot and humid sun, so perhaps your body was also uneasy. Again, from the palace to here, why did the king not go by carriage but instead walk and tire himself out?" King Melinda heard this and replied, "Venerable Sir, I came to the temple by carriage. I only walked from the gate to the lecture hall." Na-Tien heard this and said, "So the king came here by carriage?" King Melinda confirmed, "Yes, I came by carriage." At this time, Na-Tien did as King Melinda did, explaining to everyone, 500 officials, guards of the king, and 80,000 monks, "Please confirm that the king said that he came here by chariot." Then Na-Tien turned to ask the king again, "Your Majesty said that you came here by chariot. Is that true?" The king replied, "It is certainly true." Na-Tien continued to ask, "Then, Your Majesty, please tell me clearly about that chariot. What is called a chariot? The shaft?" The king immediately replied, "No." Na-Tien continued, "Or is the axle and the wheel the chariot?" The king shook his head, "Not either." Na-Tien continued to ask, "Are the trunk and the hood the chariot?" The king affirmed, "No." The Na-Tien continued to probe, "Or is the whip, the reins the chariot?" The king denied, "No." The Na-Tien did not stop, continued to ask, "Then the yoke, the spokes of the chariot?" The king answered firmly, "Not at all." The Na-Tien stopped and asked one last question, "So what is the chariot?" King Melinda was silent, unable to answer. The Na-Tien took this opportunity, slowly explained, "Your Majesty, I have brought out each part and asked what is the chariot, but the king denied it. And indeed I also see that there is nothing called a chariot in all those detailed parts. However, the great king is a noble emperor, a benevolent ruler, a wise ruler of a vast country. Yet the great king lied that he came here by chariot. I ask all of you and the great Sangha here to bear witness." Everyone in the lecture hall endlessly praised the eloquence of the great monk Na-Tien. However, the 500 followers asked the king to find a way to win the argument against his opponent. After a moment of silence, King Melinda finally spoke. The great monk argues very well, but listen to me. All the detailed parts, such as the trunk, hood, spokes, wheels, axles, etc., if they are separate, cannot be called a chariot. But when they are combined, they are falsely called a chariot, right? So, I said that I came here by chariot. Is that not a lie? Natian heard this and smiled and replied, Your Majesty. Similarly, all the so-called hair, fur, nails, teeth, skin, 5 aggregates, 6 senses. If they are separate, how can they be called a chariot? But if they are combined, they are falsely called a chariot? I said that my name is Natien, so it is not a lie. Hearing this, King Melinda was extremely pleased, feeling the depth of Na Tien's explanation. He wholeheartedly praised Venerable Na Tien. Very good. Today, for the first time in my life, my ears are very happy. Venerable, do you know that? The whole lecture hall resounded with the sound of good, good that shook the entire capital of Sagala, creating an atmosphere full of joy and admiration for Venerable Natien's wisdom and eloquence. 4. Question about the number of years of ordination. After the dialogue about the nature of names and the existence of the self, King Melinda continued the discussion with another question, this time related to Venerable Natien's number of ordinations. The king, with a solemn expression, asked, Venerable, how many years of ordinations have you had this year? The monk, Natien, replied calmly, Your Majesty, I have practiced for 7 years. King Melinda heard this and asked further, as if to find out more clearly the meaning of this number. Is the number 7 including the Venerable One, or is it just counting the Vasa? Is the number 7 the number of the Venerable One, or the Vasa? At that time, the king was wearing royal clothes with precious ornaments, and his bright shadow was reflected in the water bottle, so that everyone could see it clearly. The Venerable Na Tien pointed to the shadow of the king in the water bottle, then asked back, Your Majesty, is the shadow with bright ornaments in the water bottle the king, or is the person talking to me the real king? King Melinda smiled, understanding the hidden meaning in Natien's question. He replied, I am the real me, and that shadow depends on me to exist. It exists because of me. Natien nodded, gently explaining, It is the same, Your Majesty. The number 7 is the number of the lower monk, not the poor monk. But it is because of the poor monk's dependence on the poor monk. It is because of the poor monk, like the shadow of the king in the water bottle. King Melinda heard this, thought for a moment, then expressed his approval. Very good. That is indeed true. The stone is thrown, the lead is thrown back. How interesting. 5. Conversation as a wise man. After clearly understanding the nature of the name and the number of the lower monk, King Melinda realized that the Venerable Na Tien was a person of profound wisdom. He felt like going deeper into the Dharma and learning new things, so he suggested continuing the conversation. Venerable Sir, I would like to discuss many other matters with you, but I wonder if you are happy. The monk Na Tien replied in a calm but firm voice, Your Majesty, that depends on you. If you speak as a Panditavada, then I am ready to answer. But if you speak as a Rajavada, then I will not be able to answer. King Melinda heard this and asked curiously, What is the status of a sage, Venerable Sir? Natien gently explained, Your Majesty, when sages talk to each other, they always speak truthfully, wanting to exchange knowledge and enlighten each other. In the story, if there are arguments presented, whether right or wrong, high or low, right or wrong, the wise never get upset or angry because of it. They respect each other, even if their opinions and thoughts are different. Victory or defeat does not make them frown, but only truth and facts can convince them. If the opponent is clever, eloquent, the wise man does not try to stop, suppress, stop, or expel him from his seat, or use deceitful tricks of the tongue and sophistry to win. That is the character and demeanor of a wise man, your majesty." King Melinda nodded in agreement, smiled, and said, "That is exactly what a wise man is like." "And what is the character of a king, your majesty?" Natien continued to explain. "Your majesty, because a king is used to living in power, with one call and all answers. When conversing, he often overwhelms and forces others to accept his point of view. If someone says something that is not to his liking or contrary to his own opinion, the king will not be satisfied, ready to use his authority to punish, not based on reason and justice. Such conversations will not go anywhere because the attitude and behavior of the kings have blocked the path to the truth, burned sympathy, and cut off understanding. Dialogue in the posture of a king often falls into one-sidedness, bias, and dead ends like that, your majesty." King Melinda nodded again, looking satisfied. "Very good, venerable sir. I understand clearly. I do not like the way the king speaks. On the contrary, I will try to see myself as a wise man to talk to you. When talking, venerable sir, forget about my external splendor and just come into contact with me as a person. The venerable one should speak naturally and normally, as he would speak to the monks, nuns, novice monks, novice nuns, male and female attendants. Even if he speaks to the caretakers, the sweepers, the cooks in this temple, I will not find fault with him." The venerable Natien listened to the king's words, then replied with respect, "Your Majesty, you have spoken very noble, very good, very correct words, truly the words of the greatest wise king in the world. I am very impressed, and I will be very happy and comfortable to talk to the king as a wise man." King Melinda smiled with satisfaction. "Then please listen to me ask." Natien immediately replied, "Yes, please ask." King Melinda joked, "Yes, I have finished asking." Natien replied, also in a joking spirit, "Yes, I have answered." The king asked, "How did the monk answer?" Natien replied, "How did the king ask?" King Melinda, because he was so happy to test the wisdom of the venerable Natien, intentionally repeated these questions, but everyone in the lecture hall cheered and applauded loudly, creating an atmosphere full of joy and humor. 6. Invitation to the Palace. After the intellectual and humorous dialogue with Na Tien, King Melinda felt unsatisfied because he still had many questions to ask about the principles of life and death, about joy, suffering, and about the secrets behind life that he had been pondering day and night. However, the king thought it was time to rest, and he decided to invite the venerable Na Tien to the palace tomorrow to have more time for the conversation. King Melinda then told the minister Devamantia to pay homage to the venerable Natien and invite him to the palace tomorrow. The venerable Natien smiled, agreeing to accept the king's invitation. The king bowed, clasped his hands in greeting to the assembly and Natien, then left his seat, followed by his entourage, and left the lecture hall. Sitting on the royal carriage, the king's mind seemed to be somewhere else, wandering around thinking about the image of Na Tien, like an obsession. Suddenly the king uttered, "Na Tien, unparalleled wisdom." The entourage enters the palace. The next morning at dawn, the four ministers Nemitia, Antakya, Mankura, and Sapadina came together to attend the king. They said to each other, "How should we invite the venerable Na Tien?" King Melinda answered confidently and solemnly, "Invite him to eat and preach the Dharma." One of the ministers asked, "Your Majesty, how many bhikkhus should accompany him?" King Melinda generously replied, "As many as you like, venerable Na Tien." The minister Sapadina, who was the treasurer, wanted to save money for the royal family, so he said, "Your Majesty, please allow us to invite the venerable Na Tien along with 10 bhikkhus." That is the right thing to do." King Milinda heard this, and his face became serious. His voice was firm. "Don't say too much. I told you to let Venerable Na Tien do as he pleased." The minister Sapadina still did not give up his intention, so he continued. "Your Majesty, if Venerable Na Tien were to bring along hundreds of thousands of monks, the food would cost hundreds of carts, and thousands of servants would not be able to take care of it." King Milinda now showed his annoyance and sternly reprimanded, "You are really stingy and miserly. Money and food belong to the royal family, not to you, so why calculate and compare like that? I am the emperor, rich and powerful. How could I not even take care of a meal for the Sangha of Sankhya Temple? You all go, each of you take care of your own work. If the work is not completed, you will be guilty of treason." The four ministers heard the king's reprimand, were afraid, bowed their heads, and retreated. One prepared to take the goods out of the warehouse, one took care of the food, one went to mobilize people, and the minister Antakya immediately mounted his horse and invited the venerable Natien. When they arrived, the venerable Natien asked, "How many monks does the king want me to bring with me?" The minister Antakya bowed his head respectfully. "The palace is spacious, with money like the ocean, food like the forest. The king said that the royal family is honored to welcome and offer as many monks as possible." Hearing this, Venerable Na Tien had finished preparing somewhere. With his robes and bowls in order, he and 80,000 monks solemnly departed for the royal palace. The entire forest of golden clouds rolled like rolling waves through the capital city of Sagala, pouring into the palace one after another. The people crowded the streets, excitedly jostling each other to see a rare phenomenon. The time of a glorious and prosperous Sangha never seen before in Jambudvipa. Conversation about Natien. While the Sangha group was marching towards the royal palace, the great minister Antakya walked beside Venerable Natien, admiring him greatly. The great minister approached and asked, "Venerable, yesterday's question and answer session was very good, but unfortunately the disciple did not grasp the profound meaning, so there were still many questions. Before you said your name was Natien, then you denied that Natien, and said that there was no Natien." Venerable Natien smiled and said softly, "So, according to you, what is Natien?" The minister thought for a moment, then replied, "Sir, the breath is still life. The breath maintains life. I wonder if that breath is Natien." Natien gently asked again, "What if the breath goes out but does not go in?" The minister immediately replied, "Yes, it will die." Natien asked again, "Those who play the trumpet, flute, they only blow out but do not blow in. Why is that?" The minister was silent, not knowing how to answer. Natien continued, "There are Brahmin priests who practice the art of holding their breath for 5 days, 7 days, neither in nor out. How should we explain it?" The minister was really confused. He said, "I really don't know. I hope the Venerable One can instruct me." Natien gently explained, "Hey, Antakya, the inhale and exhale breaths only do the work of breathing in and breathing out, similar to the work of the eyes, the ears, the tongue. In all of them, there is nothing called a living being, a consciousness there. They are just body activities. You should know that." The minister continued to ask, "Where does that body activity reside, sir?" Nat Tien explained, "It resides in the 5 aggregates, precisely in the form aggregate. Going deep into all those aggregates of form, they are just empty. There is nothing called Natien. You should understand like that." After hearing this, the great minister Antakya's mind became clear. His heart was firm in faith in the Dharma. He respectfully clasped his hands and said, "Venerable Sir, from now on, please allow me to be a male attendant in Buddhism." Natien smiled and agreed. From then on, Antakya became a loyal and respectful male attendant in Buddhism, under the guidance of Venerable Natien. Wishing you all a peaceful and happy day. Thank you for taking the time to explore and understand the profound teachings through the dialogue between King Melinda and Venerable Natien. Hopefully, the knowledge and wisdom from this story have brought you new and useful perspectives on your path of learning and self-development. Let us always keep our minds pure, our wisdom clear, and our compassion vast, as Venerable Natien demonstrated in every word and action. See you again in the next discussions.